All right, so semifinal draw is released. You can see the position, and you can rename accordingly to the position and also the breakout room, and see the judges who will judge you. We will launch the motion at 11 past 10. So while waiting, please enjoy the song that we share. Okay, all right, everyone. Welcome to the semi-final round of LDI Los Angeles, Jawa Barat 2026. We congratulate to every team who passed to these elimination rounds. We will announce the motion for the semi-final. The topic for this or theme for this semi-final round is international relations. There will be a context out for this motion. The United States and Iran have had a tense relationship for decades, mainly due to concerns over Iran's nuclear program and economic sanctions. In 2026, this relationship is increasingly strained as Iran is suspected of accelerating its nuclear weapons program, while the US prioritizes diplomatic engagement to prevent further escalation and reduce global oil market instability. The motion, I will give a certain seconds to wrap this info slide.
Buddy.
All right. So the question for semi-final round is this House believes that the United States operation on Iran brings more harm than good. Um, we can start now, and the debate will be started at 11:43. Good luck for everyone. You may go to the breakout room.
Hello everyone, reminder to the people that are going to be observing this room, if you guys are not debating, please remind yourself to rename it based on the observer's uh, name that has been assigned on the group. Please follow the format. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone, time for case building is up, so we are going to start the debate really soon. Yeah, just going to do a simple roll call first. Is team government here and complete? And also do an audio check first. Checking again, is team government here and complete? Okay, well, I see you guys, but yeah, please do a mic check first before that, yeah. Is opposition here and complete?
Here and complete.
All right, thank you. Also before we start the debate, checking the panel, is Kai here? Okay, Kai is here. Will?
Here.
All right, for debaters, I think starting from the team in government, can you guys help to scroll around the room to check within your camera and your surroundings? Okay, also check on the paper ya.
Did you say check on
Alright.
the paper?
Yeah. Okay, yep, that's going to be enough. For team opposition, can you do the same? Okay, yep, now check the paper. Okay, that's going to be sufficient. Thank you so much. Yeah, so we're going to start the room. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the seminar round of NSDC Jawa Barat 2026. We're going to be live stream and recorded, so please be aware of what you're going to be saying and do not mention anything uh, sensitive. Because, yeah, people might see this and it will be probably saved somewhere else. Yeah, some housekeeping rules before starting the debate. One, please also remind yourself that the time speaking is going to be limited, 8:20 at max. If you speak more than the allocated time, we will not be taking any more notes. Two, I will encourage you guys to do PI. Okay, yeah, opposition can go to the toilet. If anyone on opposition also want to go to the toilet, you're also welcome to do so. We will wait for like 2 minutes and then we are going directly to start the debate. Thank you for the speaking order. Yeah, again, reminder of the PI, 1 until 7 only, 15 seconds. If you guys talking more than 15 seconds, I will be cutting the PI itself. And yep, now we're just going to wait for the team that are going to be in the toilet. For observer Kabupaten Ciamis and observer Kota Tasikmalaya, please also add your name to identify yourself. Yeah, thank you. Roll call again for the team in government. Have you guys finished and complete from the toilet?
Finished.
Okay.
You're complete.
Okay, all done. So we're just going to start up with the debate. Welcome the team in government. Here.
Okay. And for that, I want to make sure that I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay. If you guys would like to POI, just unmute yourself. And I prefer for the POIs to be around like the 5-minute mark. Now let me arrange my papers. Okay, I think I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The actions of United States operation in Iran have been the direct prerequisite of global recession and economic depreciation of currencies in Indonesia's and other developing countries that we have seen in the world. First of all, this is exactly why ourselves as proposition are proud to propose. Before that, a few sets of framing that we need to clarify in today's debate. First of all, we've seen like the many actions, of course, of the of U.S. operations on Iran. Of course, this is very transparent. We have seen this around in the news, but I'd like to point out a few of the operations that United States have imposed right now in status quo. And one of the prominent operations is Project Epic Fury, where the United States has created lots of military assaults on Iran, prominently where we saw how they bombed Iran and assassinated their leader, which is Ayatollah Khamenei. We believe that panels, this is the prerequisite on why we believe that the United States operations in Iran have created lots of global instability, and of course, under our side, we believe that it creates more harm than good for the global scale of the world. First of all, we have to know what the burden is. The proposition burden is to clarify that the United States operation in Iran isn't just like that it's not providing any benefits whatsoever, but on a scale we see that it creates more harm on our side of the house rather than the benefits. Of course, panels, the opposition might say this. They will say like this is America's way of securing world peace and engaging in safe international laws. However, panels, we believe that America's normalization on attacking like these countries, specifically Iran, because like we know that there's the American mindset where like, oh, if America attacks a country, it's for like global peace, and because we're America, we are fighting for American freedom and whatsoever, and etc. However, of course, we have seen that the result of this, that it has provided it has provided a bad image to America and hasn't given the true necessary for the trade-off. And then secondly, we have to like know what exactly is the trade-off that the opposition wants, because we know that the trade-off is that they're going to like bomb or like provide these military assaults in Iran for the trade-off of like global economic stability. And of course, they think that this is necessary. However, under our side, we believe that it cannot bring like the trade-off isn't something big, and like it will bring more harm cause for their side of the house. But of course, more on that later. First of all, I would like to like move into my substantive why this is fundamentally unjustifiable. First of all, panels, we have to know that right now America is in the Trump administration, and we know that America is right now in a volatile state. Like we have seen, like especially in the new Trump administration, this administration has like manifested their decision and made policies into like lots of irrational things. Like prominently, we can give examples like how America reallocated $352 million worth of Secret Service funds into like a ballroom in the South Lawn of the White House, and then secondly how like Trump decided to host a UFC event in front of the White House House lawn. So we see like the likelihood of the Trump administration to do something like irrational is very huge, because we already seen like examples of this in the status quo. It's evident, and of course we also see that there is the ignorance of Trump, and he has like the will and the power to manipulate congressional laws. Of course, as we have seen, where he like ignored congressional laws when he reallocated $352 million worth of Secret Service funds, even though Congress didn't allow him to. But of course, because he's Trump, he can do whatever he wants. This is what we see what Trump has done. And secondly is the impact that this has. We believe that the operations on Iran has lots of things that firstly is diplomatically wrong and has broken many international laws. Three impacts on this. Firstly is like the safety of Iran. Okay, like right now we see like when we define the operations of US, it's like military assaulting. And whenever we military assault, there is the big probability of like a stray missile to hit like a school. And of course, this is evident in the status quo, where we see like we have to like acknowledge a vulnerable actor, and it is the Iranian people. We see like in the news that whenever America assaulted Iran, we see that they bombed like lots of civilian buildings, even though like in international law, you cannot bomb schools, you cannot bomb a civilian building. I'm sorry, trigger warning, because like right now in the news, we see like there are many like Iranian civilians that have like died because of the US operations in Iran. So we see that this has jeopardized the safety of civilians for the sake of protecting the global peace. And of course, this contradicts the very goal of why the United States is doing these operations in Iran for the very first start. And then secondly is how it affects the economical state of the world. Okay, panels, whenever we see America attacking Iran, there were two things that happened. First of all is that the Strait of Hormuz closed, because we see that Iran is the country that like dominantly controls the Strait of Hormuz. They impose stricter regulations, like which country can move and out of the Strait of Hormuz, of course, for the purpose of exporting oil. And then we see like there are like negative manifestations of this. We see that Iran had like placed ocean mines in the Strait of Hormuz, so like many ships and cargoes cannot go in and out. And of course, this jeopardizes lots of people, of course, like the tanker ships that want to go in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. And what impact it has? Firstly, whenever we see Iran like choking the Strait of Hormuz, we see like the oil industry has been affected like negatively. Because of this, the progress in the production of oil exports that were from the Middle East has slowed down detrimentally. We see like right now economically, we see that because of this there's a global recession, and we saw like many currencies were affected by this. We saw the US dollar is weakening, and when we see if and we see the impact of the dollar weakening, like many economy of developing countries like weakening, as we see again talking back again regarding how a lot of countries' currency is now depreciating. So panels, I think this is exactly why under our side we prove that it brings more harm. I think if the proposition can, I think if the opposition can like really elaborate and like show that there's a necessary trade-off with like the global recession, the global economy wearing down and weakening, and like why the trade-off of like killing lots of Iranian civilians is necessary for what they think is to provide global security and global peace, I think that they win. So how exactly do we weigh it out on today's debate? Firstly is when we see like which one guarantees world safety. Whenever we see on our side, of course, we don't want these operations. And by limiting these US operations, we ensure that there will be the safety of the Iranian people and also other Middle Eastern countries. Whenever we saw in status quo, these US operations in Iran, it didn't only affect the Iranian people, but we also see like other neighboring countries who are neutral in the conflict getting hit by like stray missile strikes, and not even stray missile strikes. We see like Iran actually bomb like the Qatar airport, and we see like this doesn't only jeopardize the Iranian civilians, but also Middle Eastern country civilians. And of course, this provides a harmful impact. And of course, they are not securing like global peace on what they are trying to achieve. And then secondly is the economic stability. I think this is like very important because this is the main burden of today's debate, is to like they need to prove why the US operations bring economic stability. Our side, we avoid the retaliation of the Iranian people, because whenever these US operations like attacked Iran, we saw like Iran like try to retaliate against the global economy by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. And when, of course, this happens, the oil industry weakens. And when the oil industry weakens, we see many developing countries and like all of these vulnerable countries that rely on oil economy slowing down. Of course, provides this global recession that we have seen in status quo. This is why we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you for the first time speech. Now we continue to the team in opposition.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep.
All right, nice. POI just mute. I'll try to take one. Starting in 3. Wait. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Judge, their case hinges on the assumption that the comparative on their side of the house is peace. As long as we prove this isn't the case and it's actually comparatively worse on their side of the house, we win this debate. So proud to propose. One important clarification under our side of the house. Firstly, on their push on like, oh, US bomb schools and whatnot. I think no one and no country bombs schools for strategic reason. I think the reason why these kind of thing happen is a fluke, is a misdirected missiles, and it's this kind of thing. It is inevitable under their side of the house. The harm is symmetrical. Framing that, I think the Iran regime, what is important to establish is the Iran regime is currently slowly collapsing, irrespective of US intervention, if intervention or not. Because one, there's massive protest against the authoritarianism regime of the Iran, right? And this kind of thing magnifies with the reports of abuse of these protesters done by the regime itself, right? But secondly, simply because Iran have conflicts with other countries, with Saudi, for example, because one, the Saudi and Iran have different backers. Saudi are backed by the US, Iran is backed by China and Russia, but therefore there also geopolitical incentive for these kind of conflicts to happen with Saudi, for example, the split between the Islam, Sunni, and Shia, right? Therefore, not only does Iran have conflicts with US, they also have conflicts with countries like Saudi, like Israel, like Qatar, and UAE, irrespective of US influence. But thirdly, Israel already bombarded Iran with missiles before US intervenes, right? And also it's important to note that Iran also bombed Israel. Therefore, they're all in a war even before US intervene, right? What then is the conclusion? I think simply that war happened under both sides of the house. This is not the main issues, right? Note that casualties in every war, casualties are speculative insofar as the war is still ongoing. We don't know what kind of casualties, insofar we don't know what weapons these countries will use. Therefore, the most certain benefit that we can get to, there is the prerequisite of all of their benefit is we need to end the war as soon as possible. This is the way in which you can guarantee the benefits to run in the first place. This is the main issue that we need to talk about. But lastly, last point of framing, I think it's important also to establish, if they want to talk about the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz already has massive contention before US intervened with Israel, for example, and like Iran already threatens to close off the Strait of Hormuz like multiple times even before US. Therefore, this kind of therefore probably the Strait of Hormuz issue is more or less symmetrical under both sides of the house. Therefore, we understand that this is a retrospective motion. Therefore, for this debate to be charitable from the get-go, you need to look at the likely comparative, i.e. what would have happened if US didn't intervene with this kind of operation. Therefore, our stance is simple. Because comparatively, if it's not US who do this operation, the one who will do this operation are Israel. Because one, they're most proximate with Iran and they're already in conflicts with Iran. There's already ongoing conflicts between Israel and Iran, right? Because they are the one who's mainly in war with Iran in status quo. We'll explain why then comparatively US is a better actor than Israel. If we prove that, we win this debate. First argument then on why out of all the possibilities, US is the best possible actor. Why then will US end the war faster? The first thing to note is that there's massive check and balance within the US, right? For two layers, one internal, second external. Internal, I think simply because there's a massive push by the people within the US to stop the war because it impacts the people's economy, but also because there are precedents. For example, how the people already suffers through like the US operation in Iraq, for example, or Afghanistan, and it doesn't only put bad luck from the US, but also it gives tangible harm for the people. But secondly, simply that Republicans are starting to turn against Trump and his policies, right? Therefore, Trump is losing support from the get-go. But thirdly, even if it's not, even if the war lasts under Trump's administration, we say this is fine because the midterm is coming up and there's a big democratic wave within the US because there's figures like Zohran Mamdani that's rising, for example, rising in popularity, for example. Therefore, there's a massive likelihood then that the Democrats will gain power after the midterm. We'll explain why Democrats have the incentive to end the war later down the line. But also there's external check and balance, right? Because one, other countries within the regions are massively harmed by this, and mostly these countries are also US allies, simply because they're harmed by this because it halts the trades of oil or primary resources. And this is actually important and crucial for countries like the South Korea or like Singapore, for example. These countries doesn't have actual abundant natural resources, which means that they're massively harmed by the halt of trade. They'll massively push for US to end the war faster insofar they want the trade to go on faster, right? But secondly, weak US allies in Middle East, for example, like Qatar or UAE, have non-existent military power. Therefore, what this implies is that these US allies within the Middle East are also harmed by the war, and they're also bombed by the war because US put their missiles within these countries, right? Therefore, US are incentivized to cater to these countries and protect them by ending the war faster because US needs these allies because Trump had huge ties with these countries higher up, but also because these countries are where US got their oil from, right? But thirdly, is there simply just massive media scrutiny within the US political framework, right? Why then Israel have no check and balance? One, simply that I don't think like the board of Israel, especially Netanyahu, just care about what the world view them as. I think they're already antagonized so much right now, but still Netanyahu is still stubborn. But secondly, US has many strategic incentive to let Israel rain hellfire on Iran, irrespective of their direct intervention of this operation within Iran, right? Because one, Israel is their only military ready partner in the Middle East. But secondly, simply just US also has conflict and doesn't like Iran from the get-go. The conclusion of this is, if US doesn't directly intervene with the operation within Iran, these kind of check and balance they are told you doesn't exist and doesn't activate, which means if Israel is the actor within this debate, US is more likely to incentivize Israel to prolong the war, to rain hellfire insofar it benefits the US. Why then will Israel prolong the war, therefore leading to more casualties? Two layers. One, capabilities. One, most attacks are by Israel are long range, i.e. missiles, drone, and therefore these kind of attacks are not full force attacks, and this is designed to cause casualties, not end the war. But secondly, the quality of weapons that Israel have are just worse, because one, they're smaller scale, but also because they're outdated. They bought those weaponry from US in like a few decades ago, right? And this is important because this means more misdirected missiles. This means more misdirected bombs, for example. This means that more harms under their house when they say that schools are being bombed, etc. Therefore, this kind of harm actually exists way consistently under their house. But also because of the politics within the Israel, right? Because one, Netanyahu wants supremacy of power. The narrative he pushed out are fear-based narrative. Insofar the influence Netanyahu have on Israel is receding. Therefore, Netanyahu has the incentive to prolong the war. Insofar as long as he maintain the fear within Israel, then it's likely for him to still cement his power. Insofar war is just his specialty, right? But secondly, simply like the people within his party support Netanyahu and support war because most members are ex-IDF, right? Why then comparatively war will end so much faster with the US on the helm? Firstly, simply because US is the strongest military in the world. But secondly, I already told you that there's massive check and balance by the people, for example, or other countries. But even if it lasts during Trump's campaign, we say it at the very least, the Democrats have the incentive to stop the war. Because one, peace is the main thing Democrats are advocating right now in order to gain popularity. Secondly, they want to counteract Trump's policies on war. But thirdly, they want to maintain support from the people that actually they garner from within the Republican reign, right? Therefore, even if the war lasts during Trump's reign, it will end after the midterms, after Democrats gain power. Proud to oppose.
Thank you for the clarifying speech. Now we continue to the point.
Okay. Give me a few seconds to rearrange my paper, please. Am I clear and audible?
Audible.
Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The opposition side is assuming that by engaging a diplomatic movement could fix the problem and relationship between Iran and America has that they had before, because we think that it's unrealistic panels, and that's why the stand of this motion must be continued. Now we're getting into several clarification and points I need to extend and to restate again from my first speaker before. I'm going to rebut some points that is driven from the opposition side, that is to make their stance comes to crumble. First of all, the opposition side saying that the danger that is happening in the current status quo between the US and the Iran attack between each other is symmetrical, and we think that it is not true panels. And why is that? Comparatively, if we compare to America and Iran, we all know that America has a bigger incentive and power in the current status quo that will they do something towards the global or what, etc. And they hold the stronger capability than Iran, and so in so many sectors if we compare it to between these two countries. So the likelihood of America will done something even worse is more bigger comparing to Iran that that have the less capability, or we can call that whatever. And even though this narrative probably haven't happening in the current status quo, that probably America will do something even more bad than Iran, but the American reputation in the current status quo is already bad, and we all know this, and which is it is right for us to assume and supposed to say that America will do something bad than Iran in the future, and it's for me, it's really right for us to assume that kind of thing. And the several rebuttals will be conveyed by my third speaker in our side of the house afterwards on how bad the potholes that exist in the opposition house, and by that our side wins. Now, before getting into my elaborative and substantive argument, I'm going to like clarify and extend several things from our side of the house. First of all, why we think that we think that Iran has a valid reason to prepare their country for being combated. That's why they like for somehow being suspected of to accelerate its nuclear weapons program. We have two reasons for these panels. First of all, because the Trump administration fatality. We all know that the Project Free that happens in Francisco, that America sends a lot of military attacks and pressures to Iran and attack the civilization, for example, and that explains how fatal the Trump's administration is. And the second reason is that Iran has been attacked and combated from U.S. From a long time, and it really affects the civilization and destroyed so many facility and the human being also. And on our side of the house, we believe that it actually destroyed and degraded the human rights for Iran to like be exist a human being or like that, for example. And how and why this does happen, it will furthermore elaborate it on my argument afterwards. Now, the second thing is that diplomatic engagement actually brings more harm. When the info slide said that the US prioritized the diplomatic engagement to prevent future escalation and reduce global oil market instability, we think that it actually brings more harm. Because why, panels? First of all, America wants because America only wants to win. America is a country that believes that they want one side to win and one side to lose, and we all know what sides they want to take. And the second of all is that the Trump's great decision and the Trump's fatality on his decision. Because that's why we believe that the diplomatic engagement actually brings more harm. And the third of all, America is unreliable in negotiating, because we have two reasons for this. Because first of all, the only incentives the country they want to work together for their well-being only, and they don't like give the mutual impact, the mutual good impact towards these two countries. And we think, second of all, is that America wants one side to win and one side to lose, as what I have explained before. Now, going on into my argument. First of all, America would not submit, or they doesn't want to lose. In the current status quo, Iran has something America really wants. And what is that, panels? It is oil. It is the Strait of Hormuz itself. Iran has the power and lead towards that Strait of Hormuz itself. So what happened? Iran has the incentives and power to whether wants to give the profit to America or no. And if the current status quo that's happening right now, the strained relationship they have between these two countries, Iran would probably say no, and when snarks happen, it will create some incentives that the high ego of the America has itself, and the likelihood of them saying no is like really big. The likelihood of Iran wouldn't say no for them to not to give any profit to America is really big, and because at the end of the day, America doesn't want to lose. And what is the bigger impact panels? But before that, I'm going to explain that America will probably put some incentives, some like diplomatic engagement to like what the info slide have said before, to prevent the future escalation and reduce global oil market instability. But this impact creates two bigger impact panels. First of all, even though the diplomatic engagement happened, it won't be as much as effective and create significant impact to reduce the strain between America and Iran itself. And the second of all, we allow to assume that the diplomatic engagement won't happen at all, because before the war even happening, they already have a really bad relationship between each other, between Iran and America. And that's why we allow to assume that the diplomatic engagement that will happen in the future is not going to be really that effective according to their relationship and what is the America bad reputation itself. And the second argument is that it actually brings wider back impact. we all know that the U.S. combat and attacks is not just impacting Iran only. Like what has my first speaker has explained before, that U.S. is attacking Qatar's airport when in the sake of their mind, they only want to attack Iran itself. So the American movement to attack and destroying the one specific country would actually create another impact to another nation as well. That's why we believe that it brings a wider impact for the U.S. to like combat and attacks, etc., etc. And what about the narrative that happens when Iran has the power in a sort of Hormuz that and blocking the distribution of the oil away is also not impacting America only, but also the other country that needs oil actually. Panels, we think that why this Strait of Hormuz blocking or the closure of this Strait of Hormuz is happening in the current status quo itself because of the America. Because why does the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is happening? Because the movement that is creating from the America itself, that is why Iran has the right, Iran has the valid reason for them to block the Strait of Hormuz itself away, and that is why in the current status quo, when the narrative is happening, it's because the final reason is because the America itself, if you want to like that, for example, now because we believe that the diplomatic engagement of the of that's going to happen in the current status quo that U.S. wants to prioritize is not going to be as effective and as be as effective and creating as a significant impact when they want to engage it itself, because the reputation of the America that has in the current status quo and the strained relationship that Iran and America has been having before the war even starting itself. And that's why on our side of the house, I am incredibly proud to propose. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the fine speech. Just a reminder that time for speaking is strictly 8:20. If you speak more than that, we will not be taking any more notes. So yeah, thank you for the very fine speech. We call upon the team in opposition.
Hi, sorry, Kak. Before that, I wanna like edit, and I'm going to be the reply. So Cristiano is going to be reply, and Nathan is not going to be the reply. Before that, POI unmute if there's any. I will take it at the half minute, like 5 or 4. I will begin my speech on the first word. On principle, Iran also invades countries. There are no moral actors here. But secondly, we believe at the point that we can remove the US hegemony, this is already a huge net good. We're not trying to prove that US is some really good moral actor. We're trying to prove that the backlash that is caused by US being the actor to be the one to perpetrate this is a huge net utility for everyone all around the world in the long term in the first place. Firstly, I'm going to talk about why this decreases the US hegemony in the first place. 3 reasons. 1, because it literally destroys their global reputation. When media covers the fact that they are the direct cause of the global oil price drop, when then all your allies see you as someone that is volatile, as someone that literally is the one to blame for all these global oil price drop, this is a big backlash towards US in the first place. But secondly, insofar as you get the perception of you not being a good friend, insofar as alliances will simply decrease when they see how US broke agreements with Iran, how before 2018, US and Iran had a nuclear agreement. The US literally just broke this without any without it being a retaliation against Iran in the first place. And this only proves their volatility in the first place. Most likely, other countries will not want to ally with them. This is important on point 3, because a lot more countries will most likely want to leave US nuclear umbrella, mostly because then they're afraid of similar things happening to them when when Iran was also in the nuclear umbrella. They're afraid of the same thing happening to Iran happening to those countries in the first place. They're going to say, these countries are still going to be dependent on the USA. 1, this is increasing over time insofar as you have other things that you can depend on. For example, China, BRI, Russia, all of these counterbalances are going to necessarily destroy the US hegemony over time. But secondly, we only need a catalyst to leave the US, a catalyst to remove this US hegemony, that is the global oil price drop. But thirdly, this will only happen in a large scale with multiple precedents, though only way it can happen for a big, huge global catalyst like this to happen in the first place. Even if we're saying that it is precisely that they are dependent on this, that they need to back out, because USA is very restricting with its agreements. For example, how they limit development of arms and nuclear power, how they employ military personnel and surveillance in the countries that they try to protect, like like South Korea, how they limit international or alliances within other countries like China and Russia. This is important because all of these things compound and make it harder to get out and to be less dependent on USA in the first place. Why is this then good? 4 reasons. 1, less dependency and more competition in the first place, because naturally you get less dependency on USA's oil supply, insofar as other countries will develop it more, and USA's enemies like China and Russia especially, when they grow far enough to beat USA and to be a possible like competition, this means necessarily like USA won't just be the monopoly, USA won't just do anything they like, right? But secondly, you get a less dependency on petrodollar. This means you remove the naturally, countries like other countries will like remove. This is the decline of the petrodollar. This means other currencies will become much more important when it is not only the US dollar that is much important, because the only reason that it's important right now is because a lot of it are in the reserves of these countries in the first place. We remove that insofar as we create this huge decline in its values in the first place, and huge reputation drop by the US in making it seem as if it's as if it's like untrustable. We get much diverse of currencies with China, with Russia, with China yuan, for example. This means this is more important for up and coming economy, for up and coming new currencies within the new developing nations. This is important because this also gives leeway for companies and other like countries to compete with the US dollar, to not be dependent on the US dollar hegemony. But secondly, on OPEC itself, OPEC is like the oil, petroleum, like whatever, that controls the global oil prices. Insofar as this literally happened, this decreases and weakened it completely. When right now, and when in the past, they literally controlled the global oil price absolutely. This means there's zero competition between oil whatsoever. This means that necessarily every country around the world has to comply to its oil prices. The closing of the Hormuz stopped this. This is important for global development, when literally like oil prices can be taken by other companies or countries, when other countries are incentivized then to develop their own oil supply, when other countries can compete within this area. This is important because we create much less hegemony on US, especially because OPEC is something that is very US controlled. This means necessarily global oil prices and competition is most likely to drop down, when comparatively when it is in an absolute power, they're more likely to prop it up, they're more likely to increase it over time because they have no check and balances towards it. What's the long-term impact here on the oil price dollar? This also acts as a response, because if we prevent future things like the global oil price, like the Hormuz Strait closing happening in the future, at least in the future, something like this happens to oil price will be much more mitigated, insofar as you do not only depend on the Hormuz Strait. This means tensions and wars will still happen towards the future. With like World War III pending, probably. At least it doesn't impact the global oil price. At least you are not dependent on this. This is the most important point, because the Hormuz Strait might close again in the future. At least we get more straits like for the Hormuz, whatever. But thirdly, on third point on why absence of US hegemony is important, because we get less international abuse. We already told you about the direct attacks and how most attacks were banned, but also on them saying that, okay, Trump is like a tyrant, for example. Okay, this is good. We'll prevent more of Trump's tyranny and what they talk about to decrease under our side. We know like they just want oil and like overconfident, etc. We tell you how about like Somalia, Vietnam, about Venezuela, about the 100 of like communist genocides and orchestrated political deaths in dozens of countries who are just like socialists. This exists regardless of Trump. We can say it's structural because their government is not transparent, because the media there is controlled, because there's polarization and heavy like regressive narratives within USA. We say on principle, we don't believe this accounts as we don't believe countries like this, like with its constitutions and ideals and structures that are damaging, are supposed to prosper, are supposed to be the best country, the pinnacle country, the one that like being dependent on by all other countries. But I think on pragmatics, this is just harmful because they have heavy identity politics, because they have heavy us versus them narratives, insofar as they alienate other countries. They don't exactly want alliances with them. They treat them as benefits and as puppets, for example. This means they don't care, and this means they would not want global peace anyways. They would not. We would not get global peace when this USA is the one being the major country in the world. But then I'm going to engage on war and the tipping point on the debate. One, why is war prevention likelier under our side? Because we frame this. War is heavily incentivized and contingent on weapons and weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, for example. We frame this that the strategy between USA and the comparative, which might be Israel on their side, is inherently different because USA bombs like all directly. Their stockpile in just one bombing is like gone entirely. For example, how Hiroshima. But secondly, Israel, a weak country or other weak countries, are most likely to not expect victory. Therefore, they bomb more gradually. This is important because after the bombings, Israel will continue to prolong the war and USA doesn't. This means because the weapons manufacturer itself continues to sell weapons gradually towards Israel, for example, it has incentives to prolong the war. It has incentives to lobby these governments, especially like Israel, which is easier to lobby because of its economic, because of its strategy earlier, right? This means you get much more lobbying by these companies in the first place to war. You get much prolongation of war by support of these private companies in the first place. Meanwhile, when USA does it, when they remove all their stockpiles, of course they won't just like buy continuously because that's just too heavy, or because they have other priorities like defending Taiwan, like all of these other things. Necessarily, this means USA has more incentives to stop the war after like one bombing, for example, while Israel has incentives to keep it going, to keep the harms going. On severity, this is important because this is a priority to getting all the peace when USA actually wants to make deals and to prevent the harms by creating treaties, for example. Proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you for the clarifying speech. Now we continue to the team in cover.
Hold on, let me arrange my papers. All right. My pronouns are he, him. Just raise your hand if you want to POI me. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, the debate has gone to the point where we take the assumption, a very, very big assumption from the opposition team on what would the world happen if USA were to agree on these types of agreements. What will happen if the countries will all leave USA? What will happen when all of these countries see how bad and how detrimental they are to stick to the USA? If all of these was to happen, then yes, I guess the opposition would win. But panels, we have proven why. One, USA does not want to make deals and does not want to go through with deals. And number two, why it's actually beneficial, or the very least, it's actually much better on our side to not let these USA operations continue. We want to prove that it brings actually much more harm than good. So, panels, we want to preface this by saying that our side doesn't grant big-time benefits like what the opposition said. Somehow, China and Russia have more autonomy in the economy. Somehow, USA gets back down. Somehow, the economy, USA loses its autonomy in the economy. We want to say, and that we want to stay realistic and keep peace as what peace is as of right now. The thing is, panels, all of them go under the assumption that USA will go through with the negotiations that happen, and two, that all of the countries will see how bad USA is and try and opt out to go to a different, economic big time, like maybe China or Russia. Panels, we have already stated as to why the first reason that USA does not want to make these deals, panels. We have said it once again and again from my second speaker. We believe America, especially when we're talking about their connection with Iran, is an unreliable party. Why is that so? When they try and do diplomatic engagements with Iran specifically, Iran currently holds the more power compared to USA because USA wants something from Iran, which is to decrease the chance of an oil instability, and they want the access to the Strait of Hormuz. They have already said like, oh, that Strait of Hormuz already has interference from the USA and Israel. This is quite being exaggerated. They do have say inside of the Strait of Hormuz, but it doesn't mean that they have like absolute autonomy or like a big time influence in that. This is an exaggerated point from their side. So what we want to try and preface is to say that Iran holds more power compared to USA within this context, since Iran has something that USA want. And we can take a very good presumption that Iran doesn't want to give profit. Like what my second speaker has said, Iran, when doing these diplomatic negotiations with USA, will not want to give profit because their country has already been jeopardized so many times. Many vulnerable parties have been affected, and other countries surrounding the Middle East, although it is although they are maybe enemies to the Iran, but it has to be said that Iran makes or breaks the oil instability in this whole economy, in this whole say. So it's it's good for us to take the assumption that it's believable that Iran holds more power than USA as of right now when talking about this context. Now that's why we think that USA does not want to make deals, because the very first line that they have to go through is to make deal with Iran so that they can continue incentivize and do the decisions they want to do in the future. Now, panels, I want to go into the next point about how there's USA backlash, how USA will be left, how so many countries will see how bad USA is, and they will start leaving USA and shift to a bigger power. But panels, this is a contradicting statement that's already stated from then. In 2013, there's an agreement from Iran and USA, and somehow USA disagreed with this. The whole world, of course, knew about this. The whole world see how scummy USA is and how the volatile government that they have will be affecting to the global economy. But let's see the status quo right now. What has changed? The USA still has one of, if not the biggest says, and has one of the biggest autonomies in this whole economic prospect as of right now. So we think that when thinking about retrospect, it's highly unlikely that these countries, although the backlash will happen, although USA will be seen as somewhat an immoral country, this seems unrealistic for all of these countries to try and shift their focus from the USA, because the USA has incentives, the USA has power, and the USA will not let other countries go away and go to their right. No, thank you. I'm gonna finish my points first. Now, I'm going to go into a further discussions on what happened in this debate today. First of all, they said about how damage is symmetrical, how there are unrecognized missiles that hit schools and hospitals, everything like that. And if so, damage is symmetrical, it's actually comparatively worse on their side, panels, since America's operations will be allowed and will go through. This means that America will have more operations navigating through the Middle East, means that more wars will go away, will go in the Middle East. And who's to say that more damage will not happen on their side of the house, panels? But from us, we think that it brings much more harm, and we think that it's much better for the USA to not go through with these operations, because we think that without them, if they don't go through with these operations, we think that there's safety for the Middle Eastern people, because less operations are being held out by the American government in the Middle East. This means less decisions made by the USA will be happening in the Middle East. The people will feel much safer. The people will be safer because there are less USA interference within the Middle East conflicts. I will take a POI.
If the US isn't willing to make peace, why will Israel, when we already give you a million incentives, why Israel has incentive to prolong the war?
All right. So this is another point I'm going to rebut. So they said about how Israel will move independently. Yes. How somehow Israel, seeing about how America doesn't want to move, they will try and move independently. This goes to the assumption that Israel will move independently. We have 3 reasons as to why this is something that's kind of unrealistic, panels. First of all, Israel will not move without America. That's a very big thing that we have to underline, is that Israel gets the biggest help from America. So when Israel moves independently, either 2 things happen, panels. It's either that Israel lose, because compared to Iran, they don't have the exact same military power and they're smaller geographically or military speaking. And number 2, it's either that negotiations will happen so that the Israel government will try and mitigate the damages that are happening to their country when they started moving independently for the Iran. This is taking the assumption, by the way. And so we can conclude that it's much better on our side when we take their best case that Israel will move independently, because since Israel is closer geographically, regionally they are in the same place, it will be much easier for Iran to affect them. Maybe it's like Iran will try and win the war, or maybe like many backlashes will happen towards the Israel committee. So that's why it's actually much better on our side, because this prevents the Israel people from making further damages in the Middle Eastern place. And also this further I'm gonna go into my second point as to why it's also unrealistic, is because most of the US bases are in Israel, panels. So if the Israel people try and move independently, USA will have a say in this. They will not just let the Israel country just move independently and try and start something with the Iranian country. No, the USA will have a say, and when USA disagrees, Israel will also listen to the American government, because Israel cannot start wars and cannot move independently without the help of America. So, panels, we have proven as to why we think that USA will not want to make these deals. And furthermore from that, USA will not be left by these countries and will not although backlashing happens, will not actually be left. And how China and Russia and everything like that will get more incentives economically. No, panels, we think that this is highly unrealistic, but we think that it actually brings much more harm when these type of stuff happen from the USA to go through with their operations. Thank you. I'm proud to propose.
Thank you for the very fine speech. Both the counterpart, we welcome the opposition.
Hi, checking that I'm clearly visible and audible.
Yep, audible.
All right, thank you. 1 second. Three. If the US is good, then that's precisely why the war will end fast and there won't be a lot of casualties. If the US is bad, our side is the only one that gives developing nations and other hegemons like China and Russia the power to dethrone them in the long term. Government operates within a world that has no consequences. They want the US to still be in power, but they don't accept the harms of US hegemony. Proud to stand on opposition. Just 2 points of frame to start my speech. Firstly, war is always bad, and we don't contest this, and it happens under both sides. They tell you that, oh, Israel depends on the US. Sure, but firstly, we see it in a lot of cases that's just false. For example, how they invaded Gaza without US approval. But secondly, they tell you that, oh, there won't be peace because the US doesn't trust Iran to make peace. I already give you, like, my previous speakers already gave you many incentives for you to make peace. Here are 3 more. 1, Trump is literally groveling at Iran's feet. For example, how he pretends to make deals with Iran even though they're non-existent. But secondly, Trump isn't crazy. Like, sure, he's crazy, but he has people behind him backing him up. That's why the war in Iran wasn't his full idea, but the idea of his advisors, people like Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller. Sure, maybe Trump might have incentives to prolong the war, but these people who are behind his back, who are molding his policy, have all the incentives to not. For example, Kushner has massive holdings within the UAE and within Saudi Arabia, which are actively being bombed. Therefore, he wants to stop this. Or for instance, how Stephen Miller wants to maintain his political power, which he'll be kicked out by any democratic successor to Trump, right? This analysis note is a priori, insofar that if Trump is crazy, both sides cannot analyze him. We are the only side that analyze the cool heads behind his policy. But thirdly, understand that the dependency is both ways. They are codependent, insofar that not only is Israel dependent on US for things like funding, but the US is also dependent on Israel to maintain control over Iran, because no other nation like Saudi Arabia doesn't want to get off their feet because they're positioning themselves as a global finance capital, and that's why they don't want to involve themselves into war, right? The only nation which is actively warmongering and willing to go to war in that region is Israel. Therefore, the dependency is 2 ways. This is important because when the US comes in, that's precisely when they do no longer need to depend on Israel. That's precisely when they can do the dirty work themselves, and that's why Israel is losing so much support. That's why Trump literally got on the phone with Netanyahu a couple of days ago and called him a crazy quote-unquote bastard, right? Therefore, we say that it's precisely when the US comes in that Israel loses all of their leeway. I'd like to weigh out this point insofar that the chaos within the Middle East is so mostly caused by this codependency, by Israel and their actions. We already limit this massively on our side. On scale of impact, we already win. 2 crashes within this debate. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the civilian impact of war. Secondly, quickly on the economy. The first thing on war, they tell you that war is bad because people die. Understand that people die under both sides of the war. We already told you, firstly, why under their side you get much longer war because Israel doesn't have incentives to stop, and why you get less precise war because Israel has worse weapons, because Iran has worse weapons. Under our side, Iran's weapons stockpile is already out, therefore they can't bombard cities randomly, which is what they're doing within status quo. You reduce the suffering even if war continues. Secondly, you still are, in the absence of war, play on their best case. You have peace. This is their absolute best case under peace. This is still bad because Iran still has power within the region, which we say is inherently harmful. What the US has done is cripple the Iranian military and military infrastructure. Why is this already better? Firstly, if Iran doesn't use those weapons against the US. They sell their weapons to other nations which they do proxy war in. These are relations like Yemen, like Syria, like Lebanon, proxy groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. This is far worse because A, they are able to kill more people simply because they don't care at all about international regulations, about law, about reputation. They're Islamic radicalized. Secondly, it's likely to be longer and worse war because these terrorist groups act within guerrilla warfare and lone wolf attacks, which do not aim to cripple but to devastate, to actively cause population and civilian death, right? Therefore, our side, you only target military infrastructure, you only target military men, which is like okay because these people already opted into this. Under their side, you kill the most vulnerable, you harm the civilians on the ground suffering within Gaza, for instance, because of Hamas. Thirdly, you garner more division and hate within the region and justify Netanyahu, you justify Trump. The reason both of them have so much backing is because they can cry Hezbollah, they can cry Hamas. When you cut off the funding because Iran is already so devastated under our side, you don't have this. Fourthly, you also you note that the nations that say under both sides, like neighboring nations, get harmed. We say it's still worse under weighing. Why? Because the nations they target under their side are the most vulnerable. Sure, Iran is crippled, but their economy is like still better than that of Yemen, which is like a freaking starving nation. Sure, Israel gets bombed, but they're much more likely to recover long term because they already have the foundations for that. Yemen doesn't even have a functioning government. They don't even have functioning public services. When you bomb them, when you allow groups like Hezbollah to wreak chaos within them, you are much less likely to get recovery. Second thing then, understand that what happens after as a result of the US is you get a lot of like most of the death happening within Iran is not civilians we say, but is members of the Iranian military. This is important not only to mitigate our harm, but we say that we flip. This is particularly a benefit. They tell you that Iranian leaders are being killed. Good, because these are people of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. I flipped their point. These are people who have massively eliminated a bunch of like people within neighboring countries. These are the people who incite conflict, the people at the top of the chain which make decisions to increase Iran's hegemony and to fund these groups. What happens when you eliminate them? One, it means that younger IRGC members who tend to be more liberal, because a lot of them go to schooling within more secular countries like Turkey or like Morocco, which are much more US friendly, and therefore you are exposed to much more liberal narratives. But secondly, when the regime is weak, you allow liberal movements to come in. We already told you the protests are happening only under our side. When the regime is weak, we allow these protests to come to fruition. On weighing, war is short term and there will always be harm. Therefore, what you need to look on is the long-term impact. Long term, we are much better because one, Iran is going to be crippled for the next 5 to 10 years. This means that you give 5 to 10 years for Yemen to recover. This means you give 5 to 10 years for liberal movements to gain leeway and to get support for their like movements, right? But secondly, for every other proxy war in the region, because these proxy wars are typically on like a knife's edge, it's both countries of like relatively equal standing, Saudi Arabia and Iran, right? Usually, what happens is we give massive momentum to Saudi Arabia. They can finish the war. They can establish a government erratically when Iran isn't there to stop them. Therefore, for the most vulnerable people in the most vulnerable countries, which no media pays attention to, we better them. Before second clash, I'll take a point if there's any. 3, 2, 1. Secondly, quickly on economy. They tell you that developing nations suffer because of inflation and because of oil. Firstly, how is this not symmetric? Developing nations were already suffering before the war because of Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, because you either trade with the US or you get blocked off from all other options, because you have massive, for example, you have the contingency of trading with the US means that you have to like cut off trade with China. That's what they did with us, right? And therefore, you also can like build up military to oppose the US. But secondly, understand that we actually mechanize how the US actually bullies these nations. We say it's through two reasons. The first is economically. My second, Anna already explained so much about how the petrodollar is contingent to bullying these nations, about how the US power and US funds is contingent to bullying these nations. Therefore, we cut them off at the root, all their economic power tools of oppression, we cut them off, and this is a priori analysis. But secondly, the second way the US is able to get the power is through military, is through missiles and war. You just run out of these under our side because every single missile is already spent on Iran. That's why the US is already like begging Raytheon to fund them more weapons because they're running out of missile defense stockpiles. Therefore, under our side, sure, people like you're probably going to still have some form of hegemony, but you just give these nations much more power to fight back, insofar the US doesn't have the threat of bombing them off the face of the planet. But secondly, even if you don't buy that, hegemony exists under their side continuously in the long term, because what happens when you don't oppose the US is the US gets more stronger, the US economy, when, for example, Israel continues to go to war with Iran, because it means that Israel is purchasing more US weapons, because it means that oil is flowing constantly. Therefore, one, you don't get the backlash. The backlash is not because of more like It's mostly because of inflation. It's mostly because of economic issues. Therefore, you only get backlash when the economy is doing horrible, and this is good because it means you check and balance from doing things with other countries. Sure, Iran gets burned, but on scale of impact from every other nation, you give them the protection to fight against the US. But secondly, insofar under our side, you give much more incentives for other nations like Russia and like China to compete with you. Therefore, even if they cannot dethrone the US, at the very least, we force the US to lower their barrier and to compete with these nations. For all of those reasons, up.
Thank you for the very kind speech. Now we're going to call upon the opposition to start.
I will begin the first word. It is only through comparatives that we can. Oh, okay, sorry.
Can we restart the speech? The timer, sorry, has an error in my device.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
It is only through comparatives that we can judge whether something has done harm or has done good. Necessarily, if you were to be given 5K after you had a wage of like 500K, that is not good for you. That is harmful when that is reduced. Note this is important because proposition side never engaged on any comparatives. We told you that even without USA existing, Israel and all of the other nations will still be harmed. Israel would still bomb Iran like it has already done right now. This is important on a couple points because I think on two clashes under this debate in the first place. One on economy, that is the matters regarding oil and Strait Hormuz. This is the most important part because this has the most long-term impact and the most wide-scale impact. But secondly, on the wars, that is the bombing that happened in Iran, the wars and like the military conflict in the first place, and long-term world peace. On economy, I believe this is necessarily right now that we need to focus on long term. This also applies to the war swing because right now, because it is said that like right now, certain things are going to happen anyways. Certain harms are most likely symmetrical. Therefore, it is only the future that you can change. It is only the future that you can look towards. And the future is also where the most delta happens. It's when things like gradual culmination of certain acts and certain things that people do, certain military alliances that create only like bears fruit in the future. This is important because this means that it is only that within the future that we can see the delta from these developing nations not being attacked, for example, from the war peace ending earlier, for example. But note this is also important because this is a priori. Even if you were to get wars, even if you were to get a lot of harms happening, I believe even if the people survive, they would not be prosperous when they do not have a good economy. Within the economy, people still die, people still starve. This is still important because this means this is a priori benefit. If you want to get survival, you do not actually live, you do not actually live better if your economy is still bad. Necessarily, this means also that we get the benefit under our side when all the other nations around them also get the benefit of economy. And in the future, Iran, for example, if they've done like all these good things, all these reparations, they can maybe do better within their alliances, for example. But secondly, on vulnerability, we already told you and explained a huge lot an analysis why this is then important for the surrounding nations, why they are then the ones who are starving. Because necessarily within wars, there's always going to be UN peacekeepers. There's always going to be forces that is going to want to mitigate that war. But that doesn't happen within economies. Those things are much more contingent on when these wars happen. Those are the things that people expect less and people can mitigate less. This is the most important because this is the most vulnerable actors, the most vulnerable and severe harms then. But thirdly, this is also important because this literally creates feedback loop that is irreversible. When your economic harms within these developing nations happen, this is most likely going to create chains and chains of events that is negative feedback loops that happens when like your recession hits, then your companies are not going to be able to trade, for example. This necessarily means our impacts are more irreversible. But then why war is ending is also the second most important thing, the benefit we gain and why we won in the first place. One, uncertainty. Everything that was said within this debate is probably like speculative, but note that the benefit of the war ending earlier, it's not. It stops casualties, certainly. Even if all the severities happen, we already proved to you in Gracio's speech why then the severities of the harms from bombings, etc. is much lower when USA, who has like military precision weapons, is much to be the one to do it. But secondly, this is a priori to then any other benefit they try to tell you because Then thirdly, because if you want like long-term world peace, right now it's something that is symmetrical. Probably you would not be able to get that in the first place. We get that when US then is the one to get all these international backlash, when the hegemony and competition of hegemony actually exists, when there is not just a one singular hegemony and absolute power on US. This is the most important debate-winning point, and for all those reasons, proud to oppose.
Thank you for the very kind speech. To close the whole debate, we welcome the government reply.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm audible.
Yeah.
Okay. First, I'd like to say thank you to the opposition for providing fruitful arguments, and also the judge for this semifinal round. Okay. I'm gonna just start. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panels. Today, I think we've seen a lot of the arguments that proposition has brought up, and one of the main opposition has brought up is bringing Israel as an actor into the debate, and how they view Israel in this debate as an independent actor detached from American interference. And I think how we proved on our side is that of course it's unrealistic how Israel is as an independent actor, and of course under their side will crumble entirely. Of course, we see there's no world where Israel is an independent actor, and of course America is a prominent ally of Israel, and if Israel attacks Iran, that's because of America's agenda. It's because America has the interference with Israel, and of course it makes their whole argument crumble in total. That's exactly why we are very proud to propose. First of all, there are two failures that I think the proposition that the opposition has provided within many of their analysis. Firstly, is their failure to really adhere to the current status quo, and secondly, how they failed to really answer the urgency of the debate, and that is to secure global peace and security. Okay, panels, how do we weigh this debate? Firstly, we have to look into economic stability. Which side has the most security, economic security, and how which side really pushes for the stability of the global economy? Which side can provide the better solution for this economic and global recession? Firstly, I think opposition brings up how under America's operation, they incentivize war by stopping, by leveling into a full-scale attack rather than the gradual attacks. Israel was the main actor. However, panels, we have seen the manifestation, and this was brought up by my third speaker, how because because America's attack on Iran, when we talk about the Project Epic Fury, we see how the retaliation that Iran manifested in closing the Strait of Hormuz, and we saw what the impact this brought up was how the oil industry has weakened, and of course in total we see that the economic stability of the world were shaken, and of course we see how under their side they fall. And we also brought up how the United States has leaned into many irrational decisions and many undiplomatic actions, and of course under our side we avoid this entirely, and how we can ensure these irrational decisions don't get imposed and don't get manifested because of America's American operation in Iran. And then secondly is how we ensure and secure global safety, and specifically saying how for these Middle Eastern countries. Of course, what proposition brought up is that what opposition brought up is by how USA's interference, they brought up about how Hiroshima, they ended the war completely. But of course, this has proven to be worse because we see America's operations, they provided more civilians getting killed and manifested in public infrastructure and many civilians getting harmed, and not only for Iran but also into neighboring Middle Eastern countries. We'll also see in how this also manifested in how Israel is bombing Palestine, which of course we know that you cannot detach America from Israel. You cannot say that Israel can be an independent actor right now in the global status quo. And even if let's say if Israel is independent from the US, this was brought up by my third speaker, how we see that without USA, we see Israel is geographically smaller than Iran. We see military wise, Israel is smaller than Iran. So because of this pushes for Israel to bring more peaceful negotiation without American interference. And even if Israel is an independent actor, we see how Israel can bring a better benefits and how they can like ensure and push for better global safety. And this is exactly why under proposition we are very proud to propose and why we win this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the fine speech. That closed the whole debate. Congratulations for finishing semifinals. This is for the best time round, and we will announce it later, after break or before break. But yeah, you guys can just go back to the main room and wait for the result. Thank you.
Thank you, Kak. Thank you.
Thank you,
guys. Guys, y'all are so cool. It's really
You guys
so
are
much.
good.
Thank you, guys. You guys
Dude,
are
y'all are so smart. Wallah, bro. Oh my god.
good
International.
game, good game.
Good game.
Recording stopped.
Nice.